Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. First time in person here with Tim in 3 months. It's been quite a long time, so this may be a bit strange for a lot of you that watch the Q&As each month, seeing Tim and I together, but we are. There's no sort of visual effects going on here.
No, this is real.
That is Tim.
Damn, you just made my life so much harder for the blue screen. No, it's all right.
Sorry about that, Tim. So, yeah, you guys have some questions for us. We hopefully have some answers, so we'll get into that. October Q&A part 1. What else is there? Have I got everything worked out?
No, that's all.
We're doing this in person. We haven't done it for so long. Well, before we get into the questions, today's video sponsor is Thermal Grizzly and their Cryonaut Extreme, which is now available in a 2-gram syringe. This high-performance thermal paste delivers maximum thermal conductivity thanks to an extremely small particle size and layer thickness. It's also very flexible, capable of standing up to sub-zero temperatures for extreme overclocking, but also performs exceptionally well for air and water cooling applications. So if your CPU or GPU needs repasting, then I suggest checking out the Thermal Grizzly range. Link is in the video description. With base GPU prices getting so high even at MSRP, have consoles finally won the price to performance war? So we've definitely talked about the whole, especially when the consoles were coming out, these sort of questions come up all the time. Now, I'm no console expert. Tim certainly has much more insight there. I barely even know about pricing and availability. Very little. But my understanding is that, at least here in Australia, it's probably the same for most other regions, that the consoles are very difficult to buy. And they're heavily scalped and priced. I think I looked at like a PS5. It was like over $1,200 on eBay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think
what are they meant to be?
Here in Australia, $750, I think, and then obviously in the US, $500 for the disc model of the PS5. And the Xbox, I think, is scalped to less of an extent. Okay, but it's still heavily sought after. But yeah,
the silicon shortage is still affecting those particular gaming consoles. So, yeah, it seems pretty universal that things are being scalped, prices are jacked up and all that sort of stuff. And it's happening more with graphics cards because cryptocurrency, crypto miners are using those. Is that increasing demand from gamers, and some gamers are turning to consoles and that's increasing the demand for consoles? I think the demand for consoles is always very high anyway at the start of a generation, right?
I think with this generation there's been more of that happening, of PC gamers sort of giving up. You know, we've seen many times in our comment section on YouTube or on Twitter, people saying, I gave up this generation and I bought an Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5 or whatever. So I feel like if you can get one for $700, I don't know what the game ecosystem is like there, how much you have to pay for games, and if there's free games available. I know you can play things like Fortnite. Oh, there's like Xbox has Game Pass. That's on PC as well. So
if you could get one for the MSRP, like the recommended retail price, as it's called here in Australia, then $700, decent gaming unit. If all you want to do is game, then that would certainly be a better alternative to what you can get on the PC front. But if you're having to pay scalper prices like $1,200, I think places like PC Keiski have pre-built fairly decent gaming systems regularly, always available for around $2,000. So that is nearly twice the price, but it's a full computer. You can use it for more than just gaming.
Yeah, that's always the thing with these console discussion is like it's
apples, oranges type deal.
It sort of is. I guess the main talking point would be, what is it like being pure PC gamer? So you're not using your PC for other tasks. I know a lot of people do, but in this situation, pure PC gaming versus console. I think I'd find it pretty hard to recommend someone just go out and buy a PC if they're only going to game on it right now.
Depends on the type of game. It does, but I think this is more a value pitched question, so I think you're right. Yeah.
So I think just as a general gamer, you're probably, especially as you say, if you can get something at the MSRP, in the US, if you can buy a PS5 for $500,
you can't even get like an RX 580 for that price.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes the console a lot more worth it at the time, at this time especially. And I don't think that's really been the case as much with previous.
No, we're in a special time, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the consoles, I think this generation are a bit more competitive with PC. They're more backwards compatible with older consoles, so a wider library of games is supported, and things like Game Pass make like the Xbox pretty attractive.
The merging of consoles and PCs seems to be slowly happening with each generation, but our answer is somewhat redundant if you can't get it at the MSRP or recommended retail price. If you're paying close to double, then
it's sort of similar to PC. But Yeah, I think this question is also kind of why at the end of my PC hardware, the GPU pricing update video, I was sort of talking about how I don't think the current GPU prices are particularly sustainable. And I think part of that is linked into this talk about the consoles and their value, because why would someone pay, let's say, $500 for a 6600 XT when you could get a full PlayStation 5 that basically outperforms the 6600 XT? Like that sort of ecosystem I don't think could actually exist if we're in a more plentiful availability situation. So obviously, if we get low availability for the foreseeable future, like years and years and years, then maybe the current GPU prices could continue. But again, if people are just flocking to buy PlayStation 5s and Xbox Series X's instead of buying ridiculously overpriced GPUs, then those GPUs are not going to, they're not going to make sense. People aren't going to be sitting there buying those products because they're just not going to be the value option.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen these things happen in cycles before, and that doesn't necessarily mean the cycle is going to last for a predetermined amount of time.
Yeah.
But I believe we are in a cycle of obviously high pricing, and I think it will, at some point, drop back off as we've seen for the last few cryptocurrency booms. But there are a few other, as we've talked about at length on the Q&A series, there are a few different factors for why we have gone through what we've gone through with GPU pricing. It's, can be largely attributed to cryptocurrency mining, but there are other factors there that are helping prolong the pain.
Yeah, and obviously cryptocurrency doesn't affect consoles.
No.
That's just a pure demand versus supply situation for
Exactly.
those. So.
Yep.
How low can the timings for DDR5 be? We see that although DDR4 has a higher transfer rate than DDR3, it didn't match its low timings. Will this be the same for DDR5 versus DDR4 once it has matured, and if so, why?
Yeah, look, timings are always a concern when a new memory technology comes out, because I remember back with the original DDR, it was like a CAS latency of 2.5. That was sort of the variation there, and then you get up to, double-digit figures eventually. So the clock, the timings are tied to the clock tick rate. That's what they are basically. So the higher you go in frequency, the shorter they become. So if you're comparing memory timings at the same frequency, then it becomes a memory timings comparison. It's an apples to apples comparison. But if you're comparing memory timings at vastly different frequencies, then it's no longer, you're comparing apples to oranges in terms of memory timings. So as an example, I've got down here, let's go with DDR3 versus DDR4. CL9 DDR3 1600 is quite comparable to DDR4, like let's say 4000, a smidgen over 4000, like CL19. So CL9 versus CL19, in terms of memory latency, those two are comparable because DDR4 offers a much higher frequency. So you think, well, they're comparable in terms of latency, so what's the advantage of the much higher frequency DDR4? And that, of course, translates into bandwidth. So memory latency remains similar, but you get much more memory bandwidth, and that's where, for bandwidth-sensitive applications, you get much more performance. So, comparing the timings of different memory standards at very different frequencies is very much an apples to orange comparison, and we really need to do all the benchmarking to see, at what point, so say whatever the timings happen to be for DDR5, at what frequency do you need to scale to get past like low latency DDR4 3200 as an example? And we'll do memory scaling, our content will cover all of that. But yeah.
Yeah, just because you see CL40 or CL38 DDR5 memory doesn't necessarily mean that it's twice as slow.
Yeah, look, if it's at the same frequency or not much above the frequency, then that's going to be quite slow memory compared to the more premium stuff. And of course, DDR4 does have the advantage of being much more mature, obviously, because it's been out for quite a while now. And we've seen it evolve from DDR4 2133 right up to,
it's more than doubled that frequency.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot in terms of pricing now, at least from months old information, is about 3800, 36 to 3800 for relatively low latency, probably like CL16 type stuff. So, it's taken a while to get there. Where DDR5 comes in is yet to be seen, but it's not going to be too long now before we have some idea. All right. Do you think software incompatibilities such as DRM should be a serious deterrent of the upcoming Alder Lake CPUs? Are you aware of anything else that doesn't work with a big little core design? Well, I've got no idea what does and doesn't work just yet.
I think the DRM situation is very unique because DRM relies a lot on various hardware locks and they're trying to do as much protection as they possibly can, so they're only going to validate certain designs. If something looks weird to try and get around any restrictions, then they're going to disallow it. So I think that's probably why we're hearing some stories of DRM and anti-cheat in games as well potentially being incompatible. I expect those will be
I was going to say, what does it take to patch them to make them compatible?
Yeah, don't know. I assume that will be an issue for maybe a couple months as they get patched. So yeah, most other applications should still work with a big little design. It may not be optimal, so you may have some applications accidentally using the efficient cores when they should be using the performance cores or vice versa. Windows 11 is supposed to help with that, same with Intel's hardware scheduling features and all that, but there will be some incompatibilities and inconsistencies and issues to begin with. So this really does feel a bit like an early adopter platform. We were recently talking on the live stream actually about how I think it's going to be pretty similar to like a Ryzen first gen situation where the change is quite different to architectures that we've already had. So people that are jumping into Alder Lake within the first 6 months to a year, I would expect are going to be really beta testing it, or at least having to face early adopter type situations. Potentially. So obviously some of that is going to be related to, say, high pricing of motherboards and DDR5 memory. We'll have to do a lot of testing to figure out what is the sweet spot
Typically,
there.
Intel does a pretty good job at moving that stuff along quickly and getting things validated. So,
and then, the Windows related stuff and making sure the scheduler is, putting stuff into the right cores. Because even on something like Ryzen, where the architecture is a lot more straightforward, Windows has had issues allocating, say, single-thread applications to the highest performing core that you get in those CPUs. And this is a much more complex design, so I would expect, an order of magnitude more issues. But again, it all depends on, is it worth it from a performance perspective? Is the extra performance you're getting going to offset the incompatibilities and issues? And we're going to have to basically wait and see on that one.
Okay, Tim. Another one of those ones where I've spotted monitor, so I think this will be for you. What do you think is the most important factor that many don't think about when buying a monitor? I feel like it's pre-calibration, as I think most people don't have the means to calibrate accurately or don't want to be bothered with calibrating their screen, which I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's pretty important. Obviously, there are people out there that don't really care about color accuracy and just want it to look good. And a lot of monitors, even if they're not accurate, still look pretty good straight out of the box. You rarely see ones that look absolutely terrible. So, yeah, I think that's one factor. I think there's a lot of other sort of smaller, I don't know, like quality of life things, like how long does it take a monitor to turn on? Like there are some monitors that are very slow to turn on.
That's
so
true.
if your PC is booting up instantly because it's fast and new, but your monitor is taking 5 seconds to switch on, then that might be pretty annoying. Things like people have complained about DisplayPort deep sleep, where like your computer goes to sleep and then, or turns off the screen while it's still running, and then all your applications have moved around because the monitor is like disconnected from your GPU. So that's annoying.
With that new MSI monitor, probably every third or fourth day, I'll come into the office, move the mouse, and the monitor doesn't turn on. I have to unplug the display cable, plug it back in, and then it fires up straight away. So that's annoying. So
I think that it's things like that. Also, does it require an external power brick or is it built into the monitor?
What are your thoughts on that?
I prefer it built in because you can use any length of power cable that you want. So if your desk is really tall, if you have a standing desk, having a power brick, how long the little cable comes out of it can imt
Yeah, see,
your
I
setup.
was of that train of thought initially because I had the Dell 3007 WFC or whatever it was. Monitor names, they haven't evolved. That was over a decade ago. And it was it was like $2,500 Australian, and it had the built, the kettle cord goes in the back of it. And after about 5 years, so out of warranty, the power supply blew up. And I had to get another monitor that had failed for a different reason, take it apart, take the power board out, and put it in that monitor, and I ended up getting it working again. But if it was a power brick, you simply buy another DC power brick.
Yeah, that is a positive to it,
So
for sure.
I think in terms of longevity, keeping the monitor alive and being able to use it over... Because if you buy a good monitor, how long can you use that thing for? Like, quite a long time, especially if you bought...
Yeah.
If you had bought a good 4K monitor for work, 3-4 years ago?
It'd still be fine now.
You'd still be using it now. You might be using it for another 3-4 years, possibly a decade. And having the power supply be the thing that renders it useless kind of sucks. So I'm sort of advocating more for the external power brick these days.
It'd be nice if external power bricks had longer than like a 50 centimeter cord, but yeah.
Well, you can buy custom, like that's to the power brick, but then you can buy cords that go into the power brick that are any length.
Yeah, then you have to put it on your desk and stuff if it's not, or have it dangle down.
Yeah, so I think you should have at least from typical desk height to comfortably on the floor.
There has been some monitors I've seen where on this desk right here, if I plug it in, and it does not touch the ground from
that
here.
Sucks.
So,
I mean, solutions to that would be get some double-sided adhesive. I was going to give a brand name, but there are multiple brands to pick from, and just stick it to the underside of the desk.
Yeah.
We're probably getting a bit too in-depth on this question. But
yeah, I think those are the... I mean, I guess with as well to your power supply-related question is that a monitor that has a power supply die after 5 years is probably not a very good monitor after all, because that's well within the normal
I had
lifespan,
3 of them, and to be fair, the other 2... still have the original power supplies. So you certainly can get unlucky with electronics. You can buy a top-of-the-range best TV known to man, and it can have a silly defect years down the track. So that can happen with, anything. So, but anyway, probably move on to the next question now.
All right, Steve, we've got the hard-hitting questions here. The talk of the town, the big topics. Jake asks, ketchup or mustard? What do you reckon?
Like barbecue sauce or sauce?
You're going outside the ketchup or mustard. I guess it depends what
I
you're
don't do
putting it
either
on.
of those things.
Really? If you have a hot dog or like you go to Bunnings and you get a sausage and bread, you don't...
Tomato sauce, right?
Yeah, ketchup's
Is
tomato
that
sauce.
ketchup? That's the American version.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was a bit different though, because I've had...
I think it's pretty similar, isn't it?
I don't know.
Some food expert will probably give a detailed explanation.
I went somewhere once and they put ketchup on it, and it didn't taste like tomato sauce. Like, it looked the same, but it was like a different flavor. Maybe the flavors vary.
Maybe it's just like you got a crappy brand or something.
Could have been.
I usually get tomato sauce though, to be fair.
Well, tomato sauce over mustard, if that helps answer this question more accurately. But I'm really a barbecue sauce fan.
I'm not a huge fan. I go the tomato sauce.
It depends what it is, definitely. But like, yeah, it definitely depends what it is, because you wouldn't have tomato sauce on a steak, right? You'd have barbecue sauce
or no sauce, or like garlic sauce.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, if you were picking one of those two.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
I mean, maybe you'd go like a Dijon mustard on a steak, a little bit.
Let's move on. What do you think is the future for AI in video games? Will Turing/other AI chips in GPUs be limited to just upscaling, or will they get replaced by technologies like TAAU in Unreal Engine 5? Go for it, Tim.
Yeah. Well, I do think that the AI-based solutions that we've seen are probably going to be superseded by more open technologies. So DLSS, we've already seen Intel, for example, come up with XeSS, which requires less dedicated access to AI, upscaling or AI processing blocks like tensor cores or whatever. I think XeSX is going to be accelerated by Intel's version of a tensor core, but it also has the fallback version that's more widely supported on other accelerated processors. So I think that's probably where that technology is going to go. So it is going to be harder for those AI blocks that you find in GPUs to be justified for video games, because a lot of stuff that a game does not really require them, and it's hard to see where exactly they could be used. Now, again, we could be coming to an AI revolution or something for games, but AI as well tends to be fairly complicated and how many game developers are going to want to, make these restricted sort of features is
and a lot of games are made on game engines that are approaching a decade old.
Yeah,
so
that's it. The consoles don't really have these sorts of dedicated AI processing features. So that's going to obviously for this generation limit any significant AI features. But usually the reason why these cores are in these gaming GPUs is not for gaming at all. They're in there because the developer of the architecture wants to make one architecture applicable to a wide variety of use cases. So in the case of both Intel's upcoming design and NVIDIA's existing design since Turing, they've kind of tried to go with one design that can scale to productivity applications where AI can be quite useful for some things like deep learning and AI reconstructions and deep fakes and all those sorts of things can benefit from these things, and denoising and all that. And then, obviously data centers can benefit as well. But yeah, it just makes it simpler to have one architecture that can scale across all those rather than making all sorts of different architectures. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future and whether the game developers find new use cases for those. But until it's the sort of the minimum spec that is available, because GTX 1060s are still widely available as sort of the minimum spec, and those don't have these features either. Until it's a minimum spec, I wouldn't expect them to be widely used in any sort of significant way.
So we're talking about many generations of GPUs.
Yeah, many generations. And who knows, maybe one day in the future they'll get rid of them for die space reasons on gaming-specific GPUs. You never know where that sort of thing might head. All right, Steve, the motherboard man, why do you think Intel motherboards cost more than AMD motherboards while lacking features? So the example is given, no CPU overclocking on B series, no memory overclocking on H series. So yeah, why Intel motherboards more expensive?
Don't know. Probably one of two reasons, or both. I think one being that perhaps, and I have no evidence to support this, it's just, I suspect, Intel charges more for their chipsets. Could be a reason. Yep. So the AIBs aren't necessarily tacking more on to Intel boards, it's just they have to, because to make the same margin, the more expensive chipset makes the board more expensive. But it could also be that, Intel or the AIBs, the board partners, are leveraging Intel's greater mind share. So Intel just thinks they can, charge. Well, either Intel thinks they can charge more for their chipset than AMD does because they've got that sort of brand power, or, board partners think that. I think it's probably more the Intel thing than the board partners, because you would see some board partners like an ASRock maybe offering really competitive boards. But basically, I don't know is the answer. And no one can really know because that stuff is confidential. Like, it's hard to, there's very few people that know exactly what they are. Each brand charges for chipsets.
Would you say it has anything to do with, say, the VRM quality? Intel CPUs tend to require
no,
higher power
not really,
levels,
because we've seen some Intel boards with worse VRMs than the equivalent AMD boards that are cheaper, have better.
Yep.
So again, in the past, people have said, why does the B560 boards, why does this specific B560 board cost more than this B550 board while having a lower quality VRM while offering less features? Why is the Intel board more expensive? And again, my only answer that makes sense to me is that Intel charges more for the chipset, so they have to sacrifice on those features to be able to sell the board at a reasonable price point that makes sense for people that want to buy something like a 10400F or whatever.
Yeah, and it could be further marketing reasons as well, like, how much does Intel charge to license like their logo to put on the box? And if you have to put an Intel logo on the box, then they might be charging you for that. I mean, that's a fairly common practice, or maybe the socket is more expensive. Yeah, I guess there's a variety of those reasons.
Yeah, I think in terms of like budget board pricing, I think it's become more competitive over the last generation or so.
Yep.
And maybe this is something, it'll be interesting to see what the next generation does bring, because we're not expecting particularly affordable motherboards. So what that does for the Core i3 range and stuff like that is, it's going to be very interesting. Until I can get a new GPU, is it smart to get a 4K gaming monitor for day-to-day work and then lower the resolution when playing games? So I suspect this is like what I've just done, is get one of the new 144 hertz 4K. Yep. Well, it doesn't have to be 32-inch, I suppose. It could be a 27.
You could save a lot of money by getting a smaller size.
Yeah, that's true. But if it's for work, I know the 32... Anyway, I'll finish the question off. Do you lose quality by lowering the resolution on a monitor? So losing that sort of native 1-to-1 pixel I believe you do when you
Yes.
downscale still. Like it's just there's no way around it, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think there's really two ways you can go about sort of the lower the resolution one. One is to actually change the resolution of the monitor and run the game in that resolution. So, in your game, you've got your resolution mode and you change it from 4K to 1440p or 1080p, and then the monitor runs in its 1080p mode. That tends to look the worst because, the UI is also being run at that resolution. So a 1080p UI on a 4K monitor looks kind of blurry.
So an FSR DLSS type deal is...
Yeah, so it's generally better to use the in-game resolution scaling
Which
feature.
is what I do, yeah.
So you still run the game at 4K, so the UI is still 4K, but then you run the game at, say, 75% resolution scale. That still is going to look less good. It's
a bit softer for sure.
It'll be softer, but on 4K you do get the benefit of, in my opinion at least, the top 20%, so going from 80 to 100% resolution scale, I tend to find pretty hard to notice. Mm-hmm. So you kind of do have that sort of free buffer zone, and then below 80%, I tend to find it gets more noticeable. And that buffer zone is lower on like a 1440p monitor where there's virtually no buffer until you can notice it. And then obviously your DLSS and FSR upscaling techniques are going to attempt to bring the quality back up to where they were. And especially at 4K, those features are the most effective. So DLSS looks the best at 4K, FSR looks the best at 4K. So those are going to benefit you as well. Of course, it depends on the game you're playing. Not every game has those features. But I think what you're suggesting here in this question is generally a pretty smart idea, especially if you need 4K for your day-to-day work.
It's the situation I found myself in.
The way we've been able to scale games these days on lower GPUs is going to be pretty good. And even then on top of that, we just recently looked at, say, ultra versus high and medium settings, and you can potentially gain a lot there from very minor visual downgrades. You might not even have to lower your resolution.
I just think if you got the space, it's probably more cost effective to buy a color accurate 4K 60 hertz panel for work, and then a good quality gaming 1440p 144 hertz monitor for gaming.
Probably.
It's probably more cost effective to do that if that was.
It depends how expensive the 4K color accurate monitor is.
Well, you can get decent ones though for a reasonable price, right?
Yeah, you're probably faced with maybe like $300 to $400 on your 4K monitor, then another $300 for 1440p. So that's kind of the same sort of price as a 4K, just getting one 4K high refresh monitor.
Yeah, it's significantly expensive than buying one of the yeah. So maybe worth considering that path as well. Do some pricing there and see if that's something you want to do. Otherwise, yeah, getting the really expensive monitor is very nice. I can certainly attest to that. And yeah, if you've got to downscale it a bit, it's going to be a little bit of a compromise situation until you can get that uber expensive GPU that at a more reasonable price. Okay, do you guys miss the on-site events like CES/Computex, or are you happier with life of the online events or whatever? Depends on where you've got to go and stuff. Like the only event I miss once a year is really the only one I went to because we don't have time to do these events. It does take a lot of time to travel and do all that, and we don't have a day to spare, let alone we don't have half a day. Computex is definitely the one I miss because you get to Computex for me is great because we get to catch up with Jared from Jared's Tech and meet other people, up and coming YouTubers or tech media. Catch up with the Americans. I love catching up with Kyle from Bitwit, Paul from Paul's Hardware. We still want to catch up with Steve from Gamers Nexus. We've only briefly seen him at one many years ago, so we're keen to catch up and have a few drinks with him and his crew. So there's a lot of guys that we like to catch up with. So that's probably the fun part of Computex, and then there's the events and stuff.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I missed that. I think with the online event stuff, it really is much better when it comes to company press events because companies are astronomical time wasters. They are so not respectful of your time, and it's much like people don't want to sit at your computer watching a 4-hour long live stream of announcements, but in a press event that's live and in person, they're like, we're going to do 2 hours, then you're going to have a break, then you're going to do another 2 hours. Like, cut out all the irrelevant stuff.
The best thing to ever happen with those live, like Intel, I guess NVIDIA and AMD hasn't been so bad at it with the public, but people have got an insight into the boring crap we used to have to sit through on a regular basis. Do you like get to it? Like you go through this whole boring 40 minutes of just marketing, blah, blah, blah,
40
blah.
minutes of, oh, look how good we are. We make such good
and they're
products.
Like, now that we've bored you guys to death on stuff that you don't care about, aren't going to remember, and weren't relevant to anything you care about, here's the actual thing you came for, and here's one little teaser. It's like 2-minute wrap up, and that's the most exciting part. And you're like, well, thank you for that. It kind of wasn't worth the payoff, but thank you. And now people are getting, they're sitting there watching these online things. And
let me tell you, the actual events that press see are far worse.
It's an insight, though. It's an insight.
They are far worse. I think, it's just...
They make them day events for us.
Oh, it's so
well,
bad.
they used to. We just don't.
It's
go
like,
to them
I
anymore.
guess, sometimes you appreciate, being able to catch up with other press and media that are there. And, it is useful at times to be able to talk to people from these companies in person, to ask them questions, grill them about stuff. That is valuable. But the downside for that, especially when you're in Australia, is the extreme travel. Like to get out of Australia, you're looking at 10
phone
hours
calls
of
work
travel.
as well, though, right?
Phone calls exist, Zoom chats exist, which can all counter these things. And then, just the insane time wasting with presentations, like treating people in the media like they've never done a single second of research into the company ever before, and they don't understand anything about the company.
Also, we have our feet up all day, every day, just waiting for something to happen to occupy us.
Yeah, we never heard about your previously released products, so we need to be 100% refreshed about them every time.
Didn't I make the Ansel joke last Q&A?
Oh, yeah, NVIDIA were real. They're real. Well, not just NVIDIA, all of them are
they're
real
all
bad. They're all so bad.
They're as bad as one another.
But it's just, it's Ansel for them, and...
Well, there was for a long time. They've moved on since then. They've moved on years ago, but...
So I do not miss having my time wasted like that. And the great thing about a lot of these online events is that you can just record the event and then play it back faster later. So even if it's a live event, you can just attend and record it and get to it at your own leisure. Alternatively, the company provides a recording so that you can view it because, a lot of the time you just want to skip all the irrelevant stuff. Yeah,
it's not until you're working out your script and doing the research that you want to watch that information anyway, because it's like, I'm going to waste an hour watching this now, forget half of it, and then have to come back and watch it all and take notes and do that then. So anyway, it's just not convenient. But miss Computex. Miss it big time. But that's it.
Yes, hopefully Computex will be a thing in the future. I don't know if it will be. Maybe it's dead forever, but...
Yeah, I don't know.
Hopefully it'll be
Hopefully not. Okay, hitting pause on part 1. I think that is enough to cram into one YouTube video. Any longer and we get told that people won't stay and watch, and it's already a 20% club for a reason, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously we could upload a 5-hour video if we really wanted to, but if you're only watching the first 10 minutes...
Will you sit here and talk to me for 5 hours? I didn't realize you'd do that.
No, I probably would.
Oh, yeah. Fine. All right. No. But we'll keep it at 20 minutes per episode then. As always, thank you very much for watching. You can support the channel directly on Floatplane or Patreon. Links for both of those are in the video description. You'll get access to Tim and myself on Discord. We chat to you guys there. We have an exclusive Discord server for Harbour Unboxed community members. We also do a live stream. If you sign up now, you'll probably have to wait about a month before we do the next one because we just did it mere hours ago.
Yep.
Behind the scenes content, Q&A stuff apparently. But yeah, Patreon and Floatplane. But if you don't want to support us there and you just want to watch the videos, that is also support. So again, thank you, the 20% Club. We much appreciate it, but that is going to do it for part 1. So,
sounds good.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Tim. It's in person. I'm confused.
So you're looking to the monitor. Well, I'm still Steve, and I'll see you next time.